Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Forever Forward podcast. I'm Sid and I'm your host for this episode, and I have my colleague Umesh here on the hot seat. How are you doing, Umesh?
Well, it's not exactly hot seat because I was in Dubai last week. That was terribly hot. Calcutta is hot, but not that
So
hot.
this is a relatively cooler seat.
Relatively cool to see, I must admit, man.
Yeah.
But it's good to be in Dubai, and thanks. Good to be talking to you again, Sid.
So today's episode is a bit special and different from the regular ones that we've been doing,
Hmm.
and it's also one of the powerful driving forces behind what we do at Xempla.
Right,
So, this episode is going to be a discussion on the role of technology and education in powering the smart energy transition, or we could say the in driving the transition of the energy industry.
right.
So, this was sort of a um re-inspiration to have this conversation again because we always talk about this, and something interesting happened a couple of weeks ago, which we came across. So, I know this is something very close to your heart as well. And so, could you tell us what's happening and what it means to you and to the industry?
Post which came up on Smart Energy Council, where they spoke about a potential partnership on with one of the sort of members, where they spoke about you know industry like focusing on education capacity building as one of the pillars in how they expect to sort of cover the gap or bridge the gap that exists right now. And I so that's interesting. And as you mentioned, we've always spoken about or heard about from the facilities management point of view, people talking about the potential issues around gaps around knowledge, availability of skilled workforce. But when you look at a more conventional industry or equally conventional industry, when you look at renewable, especially when you look at solar installation, so on and so forth, people talking about similar problems. So which means there is a wider, skill issue or a gap that we're talking about, and hence that was interesting because uh, when we look at renewables, for example, is we often look at the fact that you deploy capital, you put in new projects, and you expect them to do well. And but the role of operations and maintenance is very significant because the deviation would mean that you are not generating as much energy as you should have been generating, and hence you are away from your climate change goals or energy transition goals. And the economic impact is significant. So yeah, I mean, I think that was interesting. Good to obviously very heartening to see that there are people wanting to do something about it, and a lot of people are talking about it, which I'm also assuming that has started to be a boardroom issue as well, which means that people are realizing that their businesses are getting impacted significantly, which is all, I mean, not that it's good that businesses are getting impacted, but it's good that it's getting the kind of attention it should have got and it deserved even a few years back, but better late than never.
Why is this skill gap or knowledge gap issue happening at this point in time? Is it um, really a very important issue that has occurred in recent times, or has it existed like throughout?
I mean, I don't know, but I think back, I've tried to do a lot of reading, whichever white papers and stuff that's come through. I think the pivotal shift happened after COVID, when a lot of senior folks decided that they might want to hang their boots, not wait till the retirement, right? And probably, so I think that, I mean, all of us have seen our lives and the way we live after COVID has changed. And that's true for a lot of people, right? Not just us. And I'm assuming that has to do with I mean, the the problem would have been there perhaps, right? But the amplification of the problem perhaps has happened after COVID. uh, I remember the first time I read an article or a podcast, or I don't remember, but either one was one of the JLL board directors talking about knowledge workforce issues. This was like 2.5 years back, once things started to come back in shape after COVID. So I'm assuming, and then we've seen a lot of articles, a lot of people, IFMA putting it out and saying that's one of the most important areas that FM companies or board should focus on, and all that's happened in the last couple of years. So I'm making an educated guess that it's COVID, which has like COVID was an enabler. Where and then obviously I think when you look at the newer generation, there are a lot of quick rewarding careers, at least perception is that there are other careers which are far more rewarding, and opportunities are opening up, right? So an industry where you're kind of expected to work slightly harder than elsewhere starts to look less lucrative. So I think that's the combination, but I could be wrong on what potentially why is this happening. But one thing where all of us are probably not incorrect or wrong is that this is happening and it's an issue,
Right.
and it has implication on businesses, for sure.
Right. So this means that the retention and the transfer of knowledge is going to be very important for the incoming workforce, and especially in the context of the energy transition we are talking about.
So in the context of wherever, I mean, I broaden it, yes, obviously. I mean, and again, to answer your question, we've spoken about this in the world of FM, but I guess whenever you look at operations and maintenance or any process uh, uh, where people of multiple skills are involved, the transfer or democratization of knowledge needs to happen from one person to the other, from one skill to the other skill, because they all work in tandem. So that is why, and when you look at operations and maintenance, we've spoken about it. There are 2 to 3 different layers at which people work, skill levels at which people work, and hence there has to be a very smooth process in which the communication happens, the knowledge transfer happens. Today, when you look at technology, and hence energy transition also not being very different, and why we are talking about energy transition, look at solar, for example. I think I read another article where it spoke that approximately the loss of economic loss of generation, around $5 billion. I don't know whether it's for a country or uh, you know, purely from the
For
solar
the
point.
US region, I think. Yeah.
But so, and when you amplify it for the world, it's a significant number. You're
Right.
probably talking about 10, 15 million billion dollars. But more than the $1 billion, it's the fact that you said that if you generate X amount, you're going to be moving towards a particular climate goal, right? But you're not actually moving there because you're generating less. And these are all linked to operations and maintenance. Now, different aspects, underperformance, but at the end of the day, it is all linked to the upkeep of the asset, right? And these are only going to, this is only expected to increase as we move along. So and that's the link between energy transition and operations and maintenance. And very honestly, when I look at solar, rooftop solar installation, so on and so forth, somehow operations and maintenance is not given enough focus and weightage. That could purely be from the point of view that people are so excited about putting a new gadget and things, and that's okay. But now people are realizing, and there is the entire, let's say, a business model to be built, or a business to be built, which takes care of after sales and services, in that sense. But that's the link, essentially, when you talk the about operations and maintenance, the lack of knowledge, or the skill, and the impact of it on the performance, and hence the economic or the expected outcome of those assets.
So the so it so it's a very important for leadership to right now take charge and kind of support this transition by empowering the workforce that's coming in. So what do you think is the role of leadership and how they can utilize technology that's becoming a regular feature in this industry?
So I think we'll probably take a step back and say why again tools or why technology. The point is that your conventional way of capacity building would have been training, right? Would have been the normal processes that have happened. It's starting to become inefficient. There's a lot of attrition that happens. So your normal current processes won't really work, to a very large extent. And the other thing is the question that probably someone should be asking, okay, how can I reduce the effort that would be required to train or build the capacity of an individual? How fast can I do it? How can I sort of keep on doing it as I move along, right? And not wait for that. So I think that is where the technology comes into play. Otherwise, you would have had courses, people would take courses, they'll read stuff, so on and so forth. But it has to be something fundamentally more dynamic. And again, because of the fact that we are saying that the technology advancement has happened, particularly when you look at generative AI, which in this case becomes very helpful as a tool where it can understand, generate, be used in conversation. So you have an opportunity to rethink how you are thinking about capacity building and and sort of training. But that also means would require you to rethink the way you've been operating and maintaining and your processes. So that's where the leadership really needs to come in, because there is no, I think we mentioned in earlier podcast everywhere, there's no silver bullet. There's no, you can't do piecemeal sort of implementation. Says I'm going to implement this without changing the core of how I do things. So I think that is where leadership is extremely relevant. Um, uh, and yes, they have the part to play. Now again, uh, there will be companies who would not think about technology, not take a 360-degree view. Only time will tell what's going to happen, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they might go the usual conventional process, but that's fine. But I'm sure there are and some of the conversations that are happening, people are thinking about it and saying they take a 360 review, not just think outside of the box, take the box away, reimagine in that sense. Yeah, that's where I think leadership is going to play a very important role. And when I say leadership, I think to add to your answer, not just the business leaders, but I think organizations like associations, thought
Mm.
leaders, think tanks, they are going to play a very extremely important.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it now raises the question of how effectively we can implement it, and how we can measure the impact of technology or tools on the knowledge, skill gaps, and the overall preparedness of the workforce for what's coming in the future.
I know in the past we've given some of the indicators and stuff, but this question, I was going through your notes, and this question prompted me to think slightly differently. Oh, more from an so I think I'll divide it into two different levels and a loop, and which is probably easy for everyone to understand. The first, I think the any technology, especially in the case that we're talking about operations maintenance, be it in FM or energy sort of space, is how effectively are people using the tools, and the indicator is the data quality. So when they're doing their stuff, how easily, comfortably, reliable information can they really entering? I think that's the number one indicator for really knowing whether whatever technology change that you're bringing in or tools you're bringing in is being effectively used. And the other is how, again, effectively, or how less of an effort is needed from someone who's like a senior engineer to make decisions or help out people, technicians who are working close to the assets, or help them build capacity, train. So how much of a time is it taking? How much of an effort is it taking? And is it decreasing over a period of time? Are you able to sort of automate it or put it on a autopilot over a period of time? It won't happen on day one. And when you look at this entire loop, so people being able to do things that they have to do, people being able to understand how they have to do it, people being able to train them, and all of this happening while you're running your business. So every day you're by default, because of your process plus technology, improving as you do things. So it's the loop. So I think that's a very I'll say it's a very it's not an objective way of measuring effectiveness, but I guess because it's not a short-term implementation, that has to be the way people have to think on measuring. You can put your numbers and indicators, but essentially you're saying, okay, is it getting better every week,
Yeah.
uh, and so on and so forth. And hence the best way, just the cost of being repetitive is let's say if I'm a technician and I'm someone who was struggling to solve a particular kind of an issue, I needed help. Do I still need help next week for that?
Right.
And when I say do I still need, I'm saying anyone else also, does that person also need help? Is it available? And if the help is needed, is the help available inherently within the system itself without me having to try to go and talk to again someone,
Mm.
so on
Mm.
and so on. So I think those are probably the ways you would look at and deciding whether whatever digital playbook you're bringing in, technology playbook you're bringing in, is that being effective or not. And I must also add, in case of solar, because we've been working over the last couple of years with managing almost 4,000 assets across a very large country, really doing it for one of the sort of O&M players, we've seen significant improvements where their time to delivery of proactive support has gone significantly down. Efforts have gone significantly down, and hence costs have gone significantly down. All of that means that that the assets are performing much better. There is the generation is happening as expected, and most importantly, for the company that probably you're moving away from your performance risks, so on and so forth. And more importantly, because of this, the loop, you are every day moving closer to the fact that if someone wants to query in and say, if this is the alert that I'm seeing, or if this is the fault I'm seeing, what do I need to do, so on and so forth, without calling anyone, without speaking to anyone, but just having conversational approach. So long way to go, but that's how I would evaluate and keep evaluating the digital journey. I mean, transformation journey.
This is because the system is actually reducing the dependence on other, like, for reducing the time for investigation. The system allows you to do it in an independent manner. Does not require you to always go back to the senior engineer, or to ask for stuff that has already happened. So the system is learning and creating that learning loop for the users as well.
Absolutely. So it's creating A, because it's learning and it's
Yeah.
implementing. That learning is also available for other use cases. So
Right.
that's precisely what's happening. And again, I think the in all honesty, if we go back, I know I probably have said this in a number of other podcasts, but if we go, in all honesty, follow what Jeff Bezos preaches and says, ask the question, what's not going to change in 10 years? So if we simply ask the question, what's not going to change in 5 years, is the fact that you would still, I mean, and the reason I say 5 years, because with the way the changes are happening, taking
Yeah,
a
we
10
don't really know how long it will.
a 10-year view is like seems so weird right now. So we take a 5-year view and say, and frankly, these are the conversations I was having when I was in Dubai, when I met leaders and stuff. Uh, and probably everyone said that, I can't take a 10-year view on my business any longer. Like, and these are people who run $100 million of P&L, $200 million P&L, multiple contracts. So they are being vulnerable in private conversations where they're saying we can't take a 10-year view because we really don't know what's going to happen. So if you take a 5-year view, right, you're saying that you're still going to be having people to maintain and operate assets, right? But what's going to change, and that is where we should all work towards and work backwards from, is how the work happens, how the process looks like. That's going to change the kind of skill sets that will be needed, the skill displacement that would happen. At what level is that displacement going to happen? And hence, because of that skill displacement, what's the level of cost displacement that's going to happen? So in a way, if you take the Amazon example, Jay Bezos said that it's never going to happen that my customers are going to ask for something pricey. They would want the cost to go up. They would want deliveries to come in a month. Like, so they'll always say that I want deliveries now. I want the quality to be super great. I want the cost to be as less as possible. So if your expectation of the customer continues to be the same, whereas everything else around the way you deliver your businesses has a cost, or let's say challenge upward trajectory, you know what your baseline is, what you're working to, and that's how I guess the operations and maintenance folks should, or leadership should also look at that the expectation is not going to change. The expectation, people are still going to expect you to maintain asset reliably. You're not expected to continue doing reactive work. You'll have to be proactive. You'll have to do it at a much less cost. And energy efficiency is by default baked into expectation. So whatever was not baked into expectation is now baked into expectation. Plus, your margins are shrinking. Your knowledge is happening. All of the issues and challenges are there. So when you effectively then go back and saying, okay, how do I invest? Think of investing in technology. That's how you really bridge the gap.
So we can always trust this process, this way of looking at things, whether what's going to change and what's not going to change. Um,
I mean,
Very insightful discussion.
I don't think we can
And
always trust. We can always go back and say Jeff hasn't got it wrong till this point in time. So
yeah,
probably
for the time being, he's got it right for now. That's what we believe.
he
So
continues to do it, right? Yeah.
yeah, and great insightful discussion, and really exciting times, and perhaps a lot of thinking to do for the industry,
But I
for
must,
people.
before we conclude, I had Siddharth. I was in Dubai, and a couple of very senior, like in the FM world, a couple of senior folks actually showed me the podcast, downloaded, and said this is up on my reading next month. So that felt good that there are people who are listening to podcasts, right?
Yeah.
And I obviously cracked my bad sense of humor there, and I said it seems like we only make the podcast for you. No, but that was good. So I thought I'll add that. It really felt good that that
Um,
you have people consuming the content, thinking about it, and I guess that's what we are, what we are here for in the Forever Forward, whether the newsletter or the podcast. The idea is that you give people a different perspective. Sometimes it might be aligned, sometimes it might not be aligned, but at least it will make them think, and which is what we are here to do.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's it for this episode. Thanks for being here, um, and to all the listeners as well. So see you in the next episode.
See you
Maybe.
all. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.